All right, welcome back to a podcast. That's how I introduced it last time. I guess that's what I'm sticking to.
Well, wait, what are we calling this?
Huh?
What is the official title of the podcast?
Of my podcast or this podcast?
Of this podcast.
Of this podcast.
Am I just a guest on your podcast, or is this the first?
This is
the inception of the double podcast.
No, this is the Dank podcast episode 2.
Oh.
If you want, get your own podcast if you want one. No. So I'm joined here today with my sister, actually, Liliana Meldrum, and she's an English writer and teacher, and we've collaborated in the past, specifically on a little short film called Under the Flower, which was recently released publicly this week, and she was the writer and I was the producer. So do you want to say anything about yourself?
I'm a big lover of speculative fiction of all kinds, and one of my favorite time periods of science fiction settings is mid-century kind of atomic ray gun gothic aesthetic, kind of golden age aesthetics, and that's something that is very much in Shape of Water. And I also love the often very silly
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. I also love the often very silly aesthetics of 80s science fiction as well. So this was a delightful double feature for me, and it was a chance for me to watch two films that I really should have seen before, but I haven't. So I was educated.
Cool. Well, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna have fun. Yeah. So what we're doing this week, we watched a Christmas double feature of The Fly, 1986, and The Shape of Water, and we are.
Which is what, 2017.
2017. Yes, they're just over 30 years apart. So
both very festive, getting in the holiday spirit.
Yes. When better to watch to contemplate existential horror than at the holidays?
Well, one is much more physical horror than the other.
Yeah, I guess Shape of Water isn't horror at all, really.
I mean, it depends on what you're horrified by.
Yes.
A lot of people were horrified by the fish
Michael
romance.
Shannon.
By Michael Shannon's fingers. I was very offended that his fingers had a very anticlimactic end of being thrown across the board.
They got thrown at...
They were rotting and stinking the whole time, and I thought I thought he was going to shove them down someone's throat. You thought there was going to be
deep symbolism?
I actually thought that movie
symbolism
was going to be much more physically traumatic than it was. So I guess I'm a little relieved.
It had a surprisingly happy ending.
Well, no, I actually think maybe I'll save my hot take.
Save it for the pod. Oh, wait.
I actually think that the ending of Shape of Water, it was probably a fever dream that she had while she was lying down and bleeding out. But that's just
thanks for spoiling the very end. 1 minute into the pod. Okay. So, yes, that is what we're doing. I guess, warning, these are both R-rated movies that are very, have strong sexual themes. So if you're a kid, get out of here and go watch Under the Flower, a fine family film. Okay. So did you want to... What did I do? Did you want to scrub through the video on silent and...
we could.
And comment on it, or did you want to give your hot take at the start?
Well, we can do some hot takes. I'm trying to think how I want to organize my my comments. But The Fly was was an interesting experience for me because I thought that it was going to be a slightly different film than it was. It's been a while since I watched any Cronenberg, although I have been on an 80s movie kick in general, and I love the aesthetics of 80s sci-fi.
I'll be the fact checker. What else has Cronenberg done? Because I'm not sure I've seen any of his other films. He has done nothing else I've seen. Wait. He did Crash, but not that Crash, right?
No, not that Crash. Not the Crash you're thinking of.
He did Spider.
No, he did...
He did Spider, a 2002 film, but not Spider-Man 2002.
I wish that Cronenberg did Spider-Man. Although The Fly is essentially
It's
Spider-Man.
Basically Spider-Man,
yes.
But instead of getting hotter, he gets...
I'm kind of into when he's
he gets
crawling
hotter
on the walls.
And then less hot.
I mean, you could say the same about Tobey Maguire. He gets
Well,
hotter and then less hot.
Some would say that.
Some would say.
Some would disagree. Okay, I haven't seen any of this.
No, wait. So did
what
Cronenberg do the crash where people they have a fetish for crashing cars? That's the crash that he did, right? Or am I confused about the movies?
Maybe. It tells the story of a group of people who take sexual pleasure from car crashes. Yes, that is.
Then that's what I was thinking about.
Have you seen that?
That was a weird one.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Was it good?
It was an experience.
Okay. Enough said.
Enough said. I don't know how much you want me to say.
Too hot for the pod.
It's too hot for the pod.
Hashtag too hot for the pod. All right. Cronenberg. So Shape of Water obviously won Best Picture in the year that it came out. The Fly won. Can you guess? Do you know of the awards that won?
I would guess best physical effect or best but I would guess a special effects award. Probably, you know what? I'm gonna say I would hope it didn't win any awards for its acting.
Oh no.
Oh no.
No. Okay. So it won Best Makeup actually, not special effects, but it won Best Makeup, the Academy Award.
Okay, I accept that.
It did win 3 Saturn Awards, including Best Actor.
Well, okay, you know what? I will say I did love the scene. I think the best scene in The Fly is when Jeff Goldblum is arranging his body parts that have fallen out in his mirror, and he's in his medicine cabinet.
That was the best acting for you?
I was just very entertained by that scene where
Okay.
he was like, it's the Museum of Natural History of Seth Brundle.
I think the whole first scene where she sees him for the first time after she leaves him, I think that was very good.
I think that there are a few scenes where he mixes like pathos with like bathos, so like true emotion and absurdity.
He gets in the bath and takes a bath.
No, that's her creepy ex who sneaks into her house and showers.
We'll talk about that later.
No, I feel like there are a few scenes where he mixes absurdity and like authentic emotion, like despair, very well. But overall, it was difficult for me to tell, based on the acting and the editing, how much of him being a terrible person was intentional.
Was
and
Jeff Goldblum, and how much was the...
how much of it was just that it was the 80s. But my one sentence hot take about The Fly is that the actual villain of Cronenberg's The Fly is not mad science or irresponsibility. It's toxic masculinity. Because literally every man in that movie is terrible from beginning to end. And Gina Davis is not terrible, but she's very stupid.
Yes.
So that would be my take. And when I said that I didn't think that this the movie was a little different than I expected, I had expected Seth Brundle, I guess, to be a little more palatable of a character, maybe a little bit of like a Bruce Banner type of guy, but he was just a complete creep at the beginning, and there's absolutely no chemistry and no motivation for Gina Davis to go hook up with him and, you know, be fascinated by his exotic scientist views. And the whole first third of the movie really plays out like a little bit of like an incel fantasy. And
so I guess the question is, in the 80s, was this like, oh yeah, he is the hero?
Yeah, I feel that a lot of, not just the way that Seth Brundle acts in The Fly, but also the way that Gina Davis's ex-boyfriend, who's also her boss, acts, as in, you know, sneaking around to her house, showering in her house, refusing to give back his key, you know, trying to pressure her into being friends with benefits. I feel like he's portrayed, like he is supposed to be slightly creepy, but he really is like extremely rapey, and in the end,
he's like the reluctant hero.
In the end, he's the reluctant hero.
Yeah.
So I think that the intention is to portray her ex as kind of like a flawed and reluctant hero, when really he's terrible and he actually doesn't reform himself at all. Like, his one virtue is that he's not turning into an insect. That's the one thing he has going for him.
Not an insect, just an incel.
And I think, yeah. And I think that Jeff Goldblum, that his character, that Seth Brundle, when he turns into the Fly, it's interesting because it's not as in other stories of transformation, where it's a slow corruption as someone is corrupted by newfound power that they have. I feel that in the Fly, it's more like his inner sliminess becomes gradually his outer literal outer sliminess. So that's what I'd say. What are your thoughts?
So it's the opposite of Beauty and the Beast, basically.
It is.
That's a hot take.
That is a hot take.
I'm trying to find anywhere any documentation on what the response to Seth Brundle's character was then. It says that audiences reacted strongly to the tragic love story.
Yeah, all that I really knew of Jeff Goldblum's The Fly was that, wow, he's allegedly really hot in this movie. Like, that was the one thing that I'd heard about this, which I guess tells you something about the fan base that I'd been talking to. And, I mean, Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldblum, but his whole demeanor is just very creepy in this movie. And I don't know. Although his hairdo in the first half is the hairdo I used to have, so I don't know if that makes me hate it more or less.
Oh, you mean his long
hair.
When did you ever have that hairdo?
Before my hair was super short, I had like a longer hair in weird layers. Then I became Meldrum Fly.
Meldrum? Oh my gosh. Did you want to go through this and...
We could.
Is that something you want to do?
Well, it depends on what points you want to bring up that I can elaborate on. It might remind me of some.
I'll just go through it at however much speed this is. 8 times speed.
I also feel like maybe this is part of it being a bit of an incel fantasy, but I feel like Gina Davis's character in this is very much like a dude's idea of what a cool girl who's not like the other girls is like, because she's like, oh, I don't wear jewelry, and she's like, I'm this tough, I want to be this tough journalist in a leather jacket.
Is that what men want? No jewelry?
Well, no, she's just she's like, and she smokes, and she's like, oh, I'm messy.
Does she smoke?
Yeah, she's smoking throughout the movie.
Okay.
I thought, and she's like talking about how her house is messy, and yet at the same time she is, so she acts kind of like tough and, is independent and spicy, but at the same time she's very much defined.
She falls in love with him for no reason.
Yeah, she there's absolutely no reason for her to hook up with and then fall in love with Jeff Goldblum, and she's completely, everything that she does in the movie is formed by the two guys in the movie. To be fair, Jeff Goldblum is the protagonist and lots of weird stuff happens. However, she's still her character makes no sense unless you look at it as she's a bit of a fantasy. Unless all of this movie was just a fever dream too, because Seth Brundle got really drunk at that event at the beginning. and was just
he fell
looking
asleep
at this hot lady journalist, and then he fell asleep.
And dreamt that he invented teleportation. Or maybe this is all inside the dream that Sally Hawkins had at the end of Shape of Water.
That's true.
And then that would solve everything. Yeah,
I feel like look, watching this first scene again, I like initially Gina Davis looks very bored and annoyed. So I almost feel like she goes and hooks up with him because she's just so bored. And then she's like, well, I guess teleportation's okay.
The whole premise of this first scene and how it plays out makes no sense because he knows that she's a journalist. He tells her that he's invented teleportation, and he takes her back to his apartment to show her his machine, and then he's shocked that she wants to write a story about it. But
his response is because he was thinking not with the brain in his skull. No, because he wasn't using the teleportation thing as like, I want you to tell the world about this. He was using it as a pickup line.
Exactly.
And then, so she's driving him back to his extremely sketchy lab, and he starts getting car sickness in the car and being like, I'm going to throw up. And she's like, wow, I'm already won over.
Yeah,
let me follow you into this abandoned warehouse as you're retching in the car.
This character, while extremely scientifically brilliant, has no good judgment throughout the movie.
No.
He really never makes a good decision.
No, he doesn't. He's very impulsive, and he doesn't predict the actions of others, which should be very predictable.
Yeah. So we come back, we see a monkey. Is the monkey for? Oh no, the stocking is first. That's an interesting. So
first he teleports her stocking because he's like, "Oh, do you have some jewelry And she's like, "I don't wear jewelry." Best line of the movie. So they teleport the stocking, and it's fine. It's just a little bit like steamy. It's like,
yes.
Now, okay, is the vapor that comes out of the teleporter, is that hot or cold? Is it like is it whatever you want it to be?
I couldn't tell you. If you hear that buzzing in the background, that's my disk drive heating up as I go through this movie at 4 times speed.
This drive can't handle just go at 4 times speed.
So yeah, she starts recording him, which he is offended at for no reason.
Because he knows she's a journalist.
Yeah, exactly. She told him at the party that she was a journalist. Yeah, and the way that we're introduced to her boss is strange because first we get the introduction at the office building.
Yes.
And then later she goes into her apartment and realizes that there's someone showering in her apartment, which she's shocked at. We don't know who it is at
I think
first.
that scene would have been better if a human-sized fly had just
Right, well, you were like, did Jeff Goldblum sneak into her apartment and start showering for no reason?
It's worse! It's her boss!
It's her boss. Who inexplicably still has the key to...
Because he refused to give it back to her.
Well, right, but she just lets that go.
Well...
Yeah, I guess it was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
It was the 80s TM.
She couldn't do anything about it, There was no, time wasn't up yet. No Me Too yet. So, be grateful. I'm grateful I'm not in the 80s.
Yeah.
And she's kind of trapped in this situation because she wants her job, but he's also her boss, so...
Who wrote this? That's what we need to figure out. Charles Edward Pogue Jr. He also wrote Psycho 3, Dragonheart.
Oh, you gotta love some Dragonheart. That's a classic.
He wrote teleplays for the 2001 Hercules miniseries.
There you go.
And it looks like some Sherlock Holmes.
Wait, which era of Sherlock Holmes?
80s.
Okay.
TV movies. He also wrote the play The Ebony Ape. And Who Done It, Darling?
Who did?
Okay. What's going on so far? Okay,
her ex is out of the shower.
Yeah, he's out of the shower.
And he's acting like affronted that she would be offended he's in the shower. And I think this is the part where she's like, I'm messy, but I value my privacy.
My favorite bit throughout this is that he will be in a conversation with her trying to claim the moral high ground, and then at the end he'll be like, but can I claim your body at the end of all this?
Yes.
All right, we're back in the lab, and he is.
Yeah, the only narrative point of her
It's
terrible
the monkey.
ex. Oh God, I can't look at this part. The only narrative point of her terrible ex is to make Jeff Goldblum look marginally less slimy. And then the ape turns inside out.
The ape turns inside out, and then it explodes.
Which is one of the more kind of delightfully unpleasant moments. Like, if you like body horror, then this
My
is
favorite
for you.
delightfully unpleasant moment was when she found her boss in her shower.
Wait, which is worse? Finding an inside-out monkey in your transporter, or your terrible ex in your shower? Or your terrible ex inside
What
out?
if you put the inside-out monkey in one telepod and your boss in your shower in the other telepod, and then merge them together into what?
50%.
An inside-out boss
Yeah.
taking a shower in a monkey. Okay, so he wears all the same clothes, like Einstein.
So that his brain doesn't have to...
Doesn't have to make decisions about
Yeah.
fashion. And that was just so erotic that she immediately had to sleep with him.
Yes, this is the first time they sleep together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what inspires her to literally jump on top of him? Because he's, like, lounging on the pull-out couch, exhausted from thinking thoughts of science all day. And then she literally jumps on him after she discovers all his clothes are identical, so he doesn't waste energy. And that was just, like, too sensual.
So what
What's that terrible line? Okay, so then it fades to black, and when they come back, she's talking about, like, how she wants to pinch him like old ladies pinch babies' cheeks.
Oh my gosh. No, before we get to that, I want to address this little bit of I don't even know what you would call it. Later we need to find out that he's growing hairs out of his deeper
skin.
tissue.
Yeah.
And to allow him to have a scar,
Or like an open wound.
an open wound. He's just in bed and suddenly realizes that he has lain back on this weird little like it's like a computer chip, but it also has blades on it. And so that creates like 3 scratches on his back.
And she's like, "Ooh, I'll kiss it better." Ooh.
Yeah.
And then which he's freaked out by, and she's like, "I want to pinch you like old ladies pinch."
But that's
babies'
so
cheeks."
convoluted. Why not just have her be like she scratched him while they were making love? Why have there be introduce a piece of technology
Because we never see that again, do we?
No, yeah, that doesn't. It's not
what
like
if-
an important piece of technology.
I thought that would be somehow
It's literally just like a Lego
connected
block.
to...
He lied back on a Lego block. Oh no.
Always clear your Legos off your bed before.
So that's where we're
Such
at.
an uncomfortable scene.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah.
So here's where we're introduced to the poetry of the flesh, which is, to me, the most I don't know, one of the themes. Would you say? Would you say it's a theme?
It is a theme. Because he's trying to figure out why the teleporter it works on inanimate things but not on biological life forms. And so he tries to do a steak, and she tries it, and she's like, "Oh, it's too synthetic. Not like you."
Oh.
And so there's this idea that the computer doesn't understand the poetry of the flesh, he says.
He needs to make the machine be like an old lady
He wants to
who goes
pinch those
crazy when he
cheeks.
pinches the cheeks of the baby.
And that, thematically, the clear connection, if, I mean, it's a bit of a, a cliche, clunky connection, but thematically the connection is that, he's learning the poetry of the flesh, just as the machine needs to learn, because he's, I guess, a bit like a machine. And so he does learn the poetry of the flesh, but ultimately, I feel like his impulsive and passionate decisions regarding his life somewhat influence his decisions to kind of get drunk and teleport himself.
Yes. So, we're not even in the second act yet.
You gotta keep moving.
We gotta keep moving. So she goes, her boss is trying to get her to write a piece on the guy, and she goes, and then he gets jealous, and that's what causes him, I'm just gonna skip ahead, that's what causes him to go and try out the human teleportation for the first time.
And he's, I think, pretty drunk at this point. So
Yes.
he's just not making smart decisions.
Right, exactly. So not only is he a dumbass in real life, he's also intoxicated right now when he makes the decision.
And
Which
he's
makes
jealous, he's angry,
Yeah.
so he's let his flesh kind of make his decisions
the
for
poetry
him.
of the flesh has
the
been his
Noah-tree,
downfall.
the oh-Noah-tree of the flesh.
So he
almost like
gets
too much
in,
flesh.
a fly flies in with him, and at first he feels great.
It comes out, his body's all oily. He
It's
immediately
all
hugs
oily.
a monkey.
He's immediately buff like Spider-Man, like Tobey Maguire. When he wakes up the next day, he hugs a monkey. He hugs his
Just like Tobey
He
Maguire.
hugs his monkey, as many men do, and then
Gina Davis comes back.
she comes back and she's
"You're
like,
so
"Ooh,
oily."
you're so oily. What's changed?" And then he does some vigorous gymnastics.
Once again, like Tobey Maguire.
We can't act like this is ripping off Spider-Man. This was a full
No,
what?
obviously, yes.
15 years before.
Yes.
Actually, I feel like this was Sam Raimi has mentioned that this was an inspiration. Yeah.
I wish there was a dark horror Spider-Man,
Maybe someday.
which I know Marvel has explored in some alternate universes, some more horror related things, but I don't know.
Who can say?
And then
So,
later he goes crawling up the walls, which he does in this movie.
in this movie, he does.
Yes.
As in all movies. So yes, he does some vigorous gymnastics. She's like, "Ooh, that's new." And then
She's like, he stuck that landing.
yeah, this goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes.
And he doesn't like say anything about the vigorous gymnastics.
Yeah.
He just kind of does it, and he gets even sweatier and oily, and his muscles be popping.
I must say, I do like all of like the weird sort of sci-fi, metaphysical things in this, like the fact that he
gets strong before
he at first feels like he's been enhanced, and then he realizes that he's being enhanced to something that's completely not himself, and that takes the form of destruction. Oh yeah, so he starts doing other weird fly-like things, like eating, like only craving sugar. So he's putting like half a cup of sugar in his coffee.
This is pretty much me every morning.
Uh-oh.
So I was like,
Are you gonna start eating
Too much potion.
only donuts and having to
Vomiting.
regurgitate them on them first? Okay, so now, not only do we see he's like starting to get like weird blotchy skin on his face, but also he's starting to grow the hairs out of his
the little
out
scratch
of this little scratch that he got.
He walks around.
He walks around in
in
his
his tidy
underwear.
whities for a
Yeah.
bit. He eats some ice cream. And that
Sounds like the life to me.
That juxtaposition is wonderful. Not the underwear, but there's like several juxtaposed shots of him scooping out ice cream and eating it, juxtaposed with little shots of him
With
of
her trying to cut his weird,
trying to clip the
wiry
really
hairs.
thick wiry fly hairs coming out of his back.
That was
And, like,
very unpleasant to watch this time around for me.
but like delightfully so, like effectively so, maybe I should say, instead of delightful. It's not a thing.
He's running down to a bar. He's eating a bar of chocolate.
As he has no shirt on, he has a leather jacket, his oily chest. He's eating a chocolate bar. He's like,
and also at this
"What's
point,
up, guys?"
he looks disgusting. Like his
Yeah.
face is visibly like it's like breaking out in a weird way.
Yeah, it's like he's having an allergic reaction or I don't know what. It's
Cancer. Or,
yeah.
So he gets in an arm wrestle with
someone who looks like the guy from Tool Time.
He looks
He
looks like the uncle from Harry Potter.
Yes.
He looks like
Only
Vernon.
the American.
He looks
redneck.
like Vernon Dursley, if he were a lumberjack. So he gets in an arm wrestle over this girl, and then he literally breaks the guy's wrist. Like you can see the bone, which is that shocked me this time around because I forgot most of the body horror in this. So he brings this woman back. He does some vigorous gymnastics for her, and then he comes out of his telepod again. So now he's twice baked. He's even oilier and blotchier. And then they make love, and then you see his butt. And then, I love this pose. Can we just freeze on this pose?
You have to put this in the,
I'm not sure if I can put this in the thumbnail. For many reasons. Maybe just this.
Yeah, maybe just him.
But it's this. He's just holding this pose.
He's like holding his
when he wakes
stomach
up,
like he's nauseous.
But like he's not really holding either. He's like he has like a half clutched fist to his abs and then like a finger to his forehead. And he's like contemplating.
He's like pretending he's like it's like the thinker statue or sculpture.
He's contemplating his life and his guilt and his
choices
and his poetry of the steak of the flesh.
Yeah, he's thinking about how he wants to eat some sugar.
Some sugar. Anyways, so Gina Davis comes back eventually, and she tries to warn him that is this when she found the samples?
Yes.
Yes. So she found samples, she took the samples of the hairs, and she discovered that they were insect. And so she tells him to, what? Be careful. Eat some chocolate.
And he doesn't listen. He doesn't really care because, and at this point, it does seem nonsensical to him because he doesn't know that a fly was in the teleporter with him. So he at this point just thinks. I mean, the whole reason for him acting with all this bravado and grossness is because at this point he knows that something's changing, but he still thinks he's just been enhanced and that the teleportation has just kind of like perfected him physically. And then he goes he goes in the bathroom.
I hate this scene.
And his fingernails start coming out.
I hate fingernail stuff, so this is always...
Yeah, Aaron can never watch this. Yeah. Fingernail stuff bothers him. But no, and again, this is another just very effective, horrifying moment. And... He
pulls off 2 of his fingernails for no reason.
I love, whenever bits of his body fall off, I love it. I just love it. No, I love Goldblum's acting in it because it's like... He's horrified, but he's also curious.
Yeah.
And he expresses that kind of like, that balance very, very well. In that there's a sense that he's fascinated by what's going on, but he's kind of grossed out too, understandably.
So he's discovering that there was a fly in his telepod, and it fades to black on his big eyes. And then Gina Davis. Oh, she is smoking. Okay. And then she's on the phone. I forget what's happening at this point. She comes back. I think it's at this point that he's all shriveled up. I do like the stages through which they
show him.
Yeah, they progress him. Because like the first time that she returns after this point, he just looks like a really old.
Kind of like a zombie.
Yeah,
it's almost
kind of
like zombie makeup on his face.
And he's still wearing clothes, and he's walking with 2 canes, which I thought was really cool because it's sort of like spider arms. Yeah.
And he's wearing gloves, so she can't really see his hands, and he has like regurgitated like acid on his shirt.
He's wearing some nice slacks.
So yeah, he regurgitates on his ear falls off. And what is so interesting is like his ear falls off, and then
she immediately hugs
him on the side that his ear
that
fell off.
bothers me so much.
So her love is pure, I guess.
Yeah. For some reason,
even though he's done absolutely nothing to indicate his human decency.
Yeah. So now.
So she's complaining to her creepy assault shower man.
I guess he's the only friend that she has.
He's the only other human being.
Literally
that she
the worst
with.
person in her life, worse than Jeff Goldblum. That's who she goes to for help.
He's
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He's Spider-Man.
So she goes back and he's like he's happier now because he's decided he's just going to embrace these changes. So he's going a little like crazy. He's a little manic. He's crawling all over the walls, which I guess is good if you're into that. He's he's no Tobey Maguire, but
yeah. So he looks noticeably worse now. He definitely looks like a monster of some kind.
But not so much like.
I love this. Yet. So she takes a recording of him regurgitating on the donuts and eating that and stuff, and then it does a hard cut to her boss watching the footage on her
now,
TV.
Did he steal that from her? Or
no, because she's in the apartment with him.
Okay.
So she's bringing it back to show him, because she said...
Because he's still the worst person in her life, so why would he have a solution to this?
Who knows?
He's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, he's
not a good person.
No.
But he's just watching the footage like, ooh, ooh. And it's very strange. And so... they hatch a plan, I guess. Oh, and then he's like, "What's the?" She's crying in the bathroom, and he comes in, and he's like, "What's wrong?"
After seeing this horrifying video, what could she possibly be bothered by? He's like, "Let's solve it with sex." But doesn't he actually like suggest that? I don't know.
Yeah, probably. So she. Oh, yeah, and so the third act plot point is that she's pregnant, and they're trying to figure out whether the baby was conceived before or after Seth became the Fly. And so there's a sequence now, which turns out to be a dream sequence for... spoilers for this movie that came out in 1986. Yeah. It turns out to be a dream sequence where she imagines that she's giving birth to like a larva sac. Which, as I mentioned before, actually turns out to be the canon opening for the sequel to this movie. Which is strange. And so, what's happening at this point? We're back at the lab. His teeth fall out.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah.
Where he's organizing all his body parts that have fallen off, like fingers, ears, teeth. He's organizing them in little boxes in his medicine cabinet, and he's kind of whimsically talking about how, well, this is the Museum of Natural History of Seth Brundle, or Brundlefly. And I don't know why I love it. I think it's because it balances very much the horror of it, because he looks incredibly monster-like and just like naked melting flesh everywhere, with also the like casual whimsicality of Jeff Goldblum's delivery, which like makes him seem very manic, very insane. There's just something very very compelling about that, I think.
I do like this scene very much as far as the writing and the acting goes, where he basically...
Oh, because she's back here now.
Yeah, so she's back. She visits, I think, the last time she goes to... Well, no, obviously not the last time, but... where he basically explains, like, there are no insect politicians. You know, ants, not ants. Flies. Mm-hmm. Ants. It's Ant-Man.
Yeah.
They, you know, they don't have any compassion or what does he say, compassion or compromise. It's basically his way of saying that he's losing his mind and that he won't be able to control his actions anymore.
So he's self-aware enough to be aware that he's losing his mind.
So she wants to... She's getting her boss to go take her to get an abortion, and unbeknownst to her, Jeff Goldblum was overhearing that from the roof of the lab.
So he knows she's pregnant.
And so I guess his idea is that since she holds his DNA, his plan now is to capture her and recombine with her so that he gets part of his... Because what he was saying before was that he wanted to limit the fly part of him by recombining with a human. So now he jumped through the window and he's kidnapping her to go do that. And she's conflicted for some reason.
Well, okay, my question is, did he only decide he wanted to recombine with her after he discovered she was pregnant, or no?
Or was she who he wanted to combine with the whole time?
Yeah.
Who can say?
I don't know.
So now everyone is reconvening at the lab.
For a little meeting.
And the guy brought his gun.
He's ready to go hunt.
This is one of my favorite bits of the body horror, with the...
when he melts his hand?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
I haven't seen the sequel to this, but the boss is the only actor to come back, and I'm curious if the character is just missing a hand and a foot, or if he has like a robot hand.
To keep up
if he has
for
like a Luke
whole...
Skywalker robot hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he melts off with his regurgitation. He melts off his hand and foot. He Spider-Man's a little bit. So yeah, at this point he's gotten his teleportation machine, added a third pod, and basically what it does now is it's a gene splicer. So you put two different things in the two pods, and then they fuse together in the third pod.
Now, how he managed to do this with his little fly paws
exactly. So
is a little bit.
It's already been established that it doesn't recognize his voice anymore, so it means that he has to do all this manually.
And now he's finally flying it up. He's grabbing her and trying to drag her towards the pod, and as he's dragging her and she's screaming, bits of his flesh are just falling off, and his skull is.
These really are great special effects,
yeah.
And it was all done practically.
And so finally, his two big fly eyes kind of pop out, and his legs are finally like fully insectoid.
It's shocking how sudden all of that happened,
mm-hmm.
Whereas how gradual it all was before.
So her ex shoots one of the cords between the pods, which prevents her from being spliced with him. So instead, he's spliced with one of the pods. So the door opens and a half man, half fly, half pod thing flips out.
And then she shoots him because he wanted to be shot.
Yeah,
because he pulls his little fly arm up and puts the gun on his forehead.
Which is a great moment, but also like Gina Davis is such a dingus because she's like, I can't shoot him, and it's like, please, just shoot him. Like, I would have shot him in the second scene of the movie, but at this point, just do it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's delightful how stupid the computers are in this movie.
Yes.
Where they're just like, well, and also like they work like no computer has ever worked. I feel, in that like it's almost like Siri, in that you can like type in full sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And did your mic die?
I feel like my audio has been super low.
It's been much lower than I can fix that in post.
Okay.
But yeah, we're still getting
levels. It's been on the whole time. Yeah. It just has been low.
But yeah, when he's like trying to figure out like wly the fly was in the pod with him, he's just typing in like he's having a conversation.
Yeah.
Just like
he's like, what was other life form?
He's like, but if fly was in pod, then was fly also in Brundle? And the computer's
like, fly is not.
And then at the end,
so it's not like he's trying to speak in any kind of coding language at all.
Right.
He's kind of talking to the computer as if the computer was a human who just like was a child, or like maybe English wasn't its first language, but it was like a human in there instead of trying to use any kind of coding language.
And then at the end, the computer thinks that the best use of its information is to combine because he has one foot outside of the pod.
Yeah.
Combine the pod with him instead of just like stopping the operation.
Yeah.
Instead of just like having a safety mechanism like a microwave where when you open the door you stop.
Yeah. So, well, Seth Brundle's not very smart. Why was he building a safety mechanism? So my question is, why did the computer make that decision? Because it wasn't like a pod within a pod. Was it just because... Oh, you know what? I guess it's because since his leg was outside the pod, it's like he was within the circle of the door. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was like the rays that go out that usually only feel him. They went out and felt the door.
And they were like, ooh.
Ooh. My gosh, too many pods on this pod.
Which is ironic because he wanted to increase the poetry of the flesh and make things less synthetic.
And he ended up becoming more of a machine. Wow. Well, we've really come full circle.
Yes.
Should we go on to Shape of Water?
We should go on to Shape of Water. There's nothing more to say.
There's nothing more to say about this.
Except, well, no, my last comment is everything you need to know about this movie and how it deals with gender interactions is when Seth Brundle, at the beginning, when he's just a terrible man, he's trying to get Gina Davis to go out to eat with him. And his idea for persuading her in the suave manner is to like wave his little hands, like little jazz hands, or open and close his hands and be like, cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger.
And immediately it cuts to them eating cheeseburgers because apparently that was just irresistible.
Yes.
That's my advice to you. So we're going to go from cheeseburgers to eggs.
Oh, good segue.
Which
eggs and little green candies.
Little green candies. Oh my gosh.
If I can switch. Now we go to the part of the show where Hank can open his disk drive.
Yeah, Shape of Water was not as dark as I thought it was going to be. It very much is a...
This was the goofy love story you wanted from The Fly, I feel.
Maybe. No, Shape of Water was much more... Shape of Water was very sentimental, and I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily. It was very... it was very focused on giving each character the ending they deserved, except for her artist friend. He got his hair, so I mean... And I guess
except for the communist, the Russian double agent.
My hot take is that he is the best character. Dimitri is the best character.
I did like him a lot.
He's amazing.
Yes. So this film, what did you think about the color theory in this movie?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was a constant reminder that it was Del Toro, but I didn't mind it. I liked how there was, on one hand, an emphasis on the drabness of her existence, but also on like the moments of richness in her existence. And something I really loved about this film, which I didn't really think about it until I started watching it, this element, is that the protagonist of it's a science fiction story in which the protagonist isn't a scientist, isn't a creature, isn't anyone who you would think would be directly involved, but is somebody who is a cleaning lady at a military science research center. So I really enjoyed the ostensibly unlikely choice of protagonist, and I think like that the color theory was able to kind of, or the use of color was kind of able to make that into an interesting contrast, kind of showing like the drabness, but then also the wonderment of the events.
Yeah. Well, the color green is the main color motif in this, and I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure out what all it means, because I don't know. Do you think like green represents the future? Because there are the two instances where the artist they reject his artwork because the cake or the Jell-O is red instead of green. And then the car that Michael Shannon buys is green, or he calls it green, and then the guy says no, it's teal.
And so what thematically does that mean? A denial of, because I want to say, because the creature is green, and the creature also needs green algae in its water to live, and she also is often dressed in green or like brownish greens. So, and sometimes Michael Shannon's candies are green. Right. So
those are the only candies he eats.
Yeah.
So, what could it all mean?
Are the candies always green, or are they sometimes pink? Did I imagine that?
No, because at the end he says that those are the only ones that he eats. Yeah. So, well, I mean, the only reason why it strikes me so much is because they call attention to it in such specific ways, at least 2 or 3 times.
Well, red is also an important motif in contrast with green.
Right.
Red, as far like in relation to blood, there's also red in the interior of the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
So does green symbolize something natural or positive, and red symbolizes something unnatural or dangerous. I mean, which is the most cliche symbolism of red you could use. But maybe that's why Michael Shannon is like, oh, this is green, I don't like it.
But she is wearing a red outfit after the first time that she and the creature make love. Mm-hmm. So, who knows?
Maybe red is something like stirred to life. I don't know. But yeah, the color palette in the facility is all greens and like antiseptic blues. There's a lot of teal, there's a lot of blue as well. Except when blood is, spilled on the floor, which again, like that contrast.
I do love the design of the facility. I think it's really delightfully, I don't know. Could you call that steampunk almost?
It's a lot of retrofuturism. The term I'm looking for is it's very like atom punk or ray gun gothic. It's very much technology and design aesthetics of mid-century.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of focus on what mid-century Americans thought would be the positive aesthetics of the future, and or positive sci-fi aesthetics of the future. And there's several moments, I think, where some, like Michael Shannon's kids are talking about, well, in the future, are we going to have jetpacks? Are we going to have
right,
this?
Yeah.
And the design of his Cadillac, all of that is very much, kind of stylized, larger than life machine aesthetic, which I like very much. I really like that's one of my favorite speculative fiction kind of eras aesthetically. I would say cyberpunk is top for me, and then is kind of that mid-century ray gun gothic.
So this did win Best Production Design,
mm-hmm.
which I think is deserved, along with score and director and picture, of course.
After watching it, I do understand why it won Best Picture. And I do really like that. I mean, okay, it should not have beaten Blade Runner, because this is what Blade Runner was 2017, right?
Was Blade Runner?
Because I was really mad this one
was
Best,
that even
Best Picture,
nominated?
I'm trying to remember why. It wasn't, but both visually, characterization-wise, and thematically, Blade Runner 2049 was a better film than this. However, I do like that this won Best Picture in that it is technically a science fiction film. It's a speculative fiction film. Or I guess you could call it magical realism to an extent. It's more science fantasy than science fiction. But I like that. I love when that a speculative fiction work won Best Picture. I just think there was a better one.
Well, it was also Blade Runner did win 2 awards, so
but not Best Picture.
No. It was also original concept.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a sequel, so that probably helped it. And also, not many genre films like that have won Best Picture. So
no, that's what I was saying. Yeah,
many people were happy.
I think that what it means, what it sets a precedent for, is very important and very good. And it was a very good film. I loved I thought that the antagonist was amazingly creepy, and that was very effective. The visual. Oh, and it's the creature's blood. The blood in the bathroom.
Yeah, that was okay.
That was a beautiful moment. I love Sally Field's character, and I love not to be Sally Hawkins.
Sally Fields is. You're thinking of Spider-Man again. Only your favorite, Andrew Garfield's.
Oh no! Don't even speak his name.
That's another pod.
Sally Hawkins. I love that Sally Hawkins in this movie is a middle-aged woman with a disability who is portrayed as being someone with a rich emotional landscape and also someone in possession of her sexuality.
Yes.
So far beyond this just being a good speculative fiction movie, it is great characterization wise and has such a fantastic female character, someone who has both strengths and weaknesses and who really has to grow throughout the film, and it is allowed to be both strong and also weak at different points in the movie.
So apparently this had plagiarism accusations. What property do you think it would have been accused of plagiarizing?
Because he's basically Abe Sapien.
That's what I thought it was going to be, but no.
Because he is basically Abe Sapien
Right.
from Hellboy.
Right. But no, in fact, it was Paul Zindel, who's a playwright, said that this was plagiarizing his work called "Let Me Hear You Whisper," about a woman who falls in love with a dolphin and tries to
a literal dolphin.
a dolphin and kidnap the dolphin from a scientific facility.
That makes no sense because there's a difference between a literal dolphin and like a fish man who's like a mythological creature. That's silly. I'm assuming they didn't win.
No.
Did they have a lawsuit against them or no?
Possibly. There's a lot of plagiarism accusations, which is interesting. But as they say, there are only a few stories that you can tell.
Yes.
Man meets fish. Woman meets fish.
Well, who
Girl
is it,
meets fish.
Who is it who said that
Girl
there's-
falls in love with fish.
Who is it who said that there's only two stories? A man comes to town or a man leaves town. So which of those two stories is that?
Let me
I would be a
fact check
man
that.
comes to town,
I
I
guess
guess. A fish comes to town.
Only two stories. A man comes to town. The late novelist John Gardner once said there are only two kinds of stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town.
There you go. So I guess this would be a stranger comes to town.
Right. Yes. It's very broad.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so what's going on right now?
Is this the first time she's bringing an egg in
Yeah,
for the
probably.
creature?
What are the
How does
symbolism?
How does she know that he likes eggs, or she just guesses?
Or maybe she just eats.
She eats a lot of
She
eggs.
just eats 10 hard-boiled eggs for lunch every day.
She does eat a lot of eggs and egg salad sandwiches. So,
Is that what she was eating? Egg salad?
and I mean, eggs symbolize what? Birth,
Fertility.
fertility,
Life.
life.
Um,
He's like, "Are you fertile?
are you alive? Oh, man. This would have been such a better...
I still say that when they first interact, his mannerisms remind me of like a cat.
Yeah.
In the sense that, or like, I mean, he is a feral creature, but a creature that, you know, is curious, but also a bit afraid, and that all makes sense because at this point, you know, he's been tortured for no particular reason. It's not as if Michael Shannon is it's not as if he is even running very scientific tests on him, because, you know, we see him in a little while literally just baiting and torturing him for sadistic pleasure. So it's like this creature is very hesitant to believe that someone is being nice to him. So she leaves the egg, she leaves, and he's like, ooh, a protein treat.
Ooh. Good protein.
Good protein.
Yeah, my secret desire is that this would be part of the classic Universal monster universe as the creature from the Black Lagoon character, because it's much better than any
Creature
of
from the
those
Black
entries so far.
Yeah.
Are you excited about The Invisible Man?
That's gonna be with Elizabeth.
Yeah, from
from Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
And Mad Men. I think that I forget who's gonna be the Invisible Man. Someone I think who could play creepy well.
Someone who doesn't matter because
he's gonna be
we won't see
invisible
him.
the whole time.
Wait, is it?
I mean, I think that the Invisible Man has a lot of potential to be a good story.
My gosh. Michael Shannon and his wife
Michael
are so
Shannon
weird
and his wife
in
have
this
such
movie.
a creepy dynamic.
Yeah.
Like, it's just very bizarre. Although I feel like they really play up Michael Shannon and his wife's bizarre, like, sensual encounters, because it's a contrast to the wholesomeness and affection, I guess, of
Oh.
yeah, what's her name, Eliza? Of Eliza
Yes.
and the creatures' interactions. So ironic. It's like humans are the real monsters.
Apparently, his official name in the credits is Amphibian Man. It'd be nice if they gave him a name.
Yeah.
Like,
Bob.
I don't know. Bob.
Fred.
Like Bob Fred.
Bob
No, Bob
Fred.
was the fake name of the communist.
Oh, that's right.
My name is also Bob.
My name is Bob. I'm totally an American. I mean, he had a good American accent. Like, he was all good.
Yeah.
Do you think that Bob, aka
Dimitri.
I want to call him Dominic. Dimitri, would he have gotten away with it if he hadn't been quote unquote weak enough to help
Gotten away with what?
his life in the end? Would his bosses, higher ups, have shot him when he was done being used for spying purposes if he hadn't messed up, or do you think they were always going to kill him?
Oh.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So was he doomed from the beginning? He just decided to do something good with his life. Because he's a scientist. A scientist knows no country. He just wants to not be terrible. Unless you're Seth Brundle. So
Unless you are
let's
one of the many terrible scientists in cinema.
So let's contrast Dimitri, the scientist / Soviet spy, with Seth Brundle from The Fly, and Dimitri is
Okay.
a much better person.
He looks familiar. Is that what's his name? The one Russian guy looks like the killer from Spider-Man.
The guy who shoots Uncle Ben?
Yeah.
It's all coming together.
It's all coming
it's all
together.
one cinematic universe.
No, it doesn't look like it. His name is Michael Papajohn, so I remember it. He was in Nightcrawler, and in The Dark Knight Rises, and in Jurassic World, and
I keep
in
thinking that Nightcrawler is
Dawn
about Nightcrawler,
of the Planet of
which
the
is
Apes.
not.
That would be nice. I would love Jake Gyllenhaal playing the character Nightcrawler.
I don't think he's going to do that now.
Since he's Mysterio?
Yeah.
Or what if...
Who knows?
Yeah, what
Because
if...
So many MCU people have done double duty.
Or what if he plays... We've just totally lost Shape of Water. What if he plays... This is as it should be. What if he plays Mysterio
As
impersonating
what's his name?
Nightcrawler?
Kurt
Wagner.
Kurt Wagner.
That would be a twist. Okay. Well, what else is there to say about this movie? I'm just gonna scrub through it a little bit.
I love her.
It does rely on a lot of cliche as far as the military and society and all that. I guess that's why is it going slower than usual now? I guess that would be the weaker part for me.
I feel that when it uses those cliches, it elevates them to archetype, in the sense that, I mean, the reason why you categorize something as a cliche or stereotype rather than an archetype is because it portrays something like a fundamental human thing that happens in a very two-dimensional way. And I feel like Shape of Water does use a lot of commonly used tropes, but the characters are very three-dimensional. At least Eliza is, Dimitri is, what's the name of her friend?
Zelda.
Eliza's friend.
Octavia
Artist
Spencer.
friend. Oh.
Zelda.
Oh no, not Zelda. Zelda's.
Who are you
I like Zelda too.
The artist. He doesn't need a name.
He doesn't have. He was like my favorite. No, he was a cool character.
Yeah.
Because he was great because he was portrayed as
He's one of the most
like,
sympathetic.
Yeah, he was a character who faced discrimination
Giles.
himself.
I think they said Giles like once.
It's
difficult
It's Rupert
because...
Giles from Buffy. No.
Okay.
It's Anthony Stewart Head. No, it's not.
What else has Richard Jenkins been in?
No, I thought that his character...
Who's Burn After Reading?
...was interesting because there was... And again, this is a very obvious, tropey kind of parallel to have, but just as the creature is kind of misunderstood and hated by society, so he too is... whenever he tries to be his true self.
Oh, I know what I know him from. He was one of the two office workers in Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I love them.
He was also in Burn After Reading. Have you seen that?
Yes.
That's such a good movie.
That's so good.
Okay.
Wait, who is he in Burn After Reading? Is he the boss or the head of the... Is he Francis McDormand? Is that how you say
He's
name?
Ted.
Boss in Burn After Reading. At the health club.
She turns to Ted. Oh, he's
her
the
boss.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
At Hard Bodies.
Anyway.
Anyways, all right, we're in the second half. So in the midpoint of the movie, they stage a heist, which is kind of fun, where everyone thinks that it's a SWAT team of 10 spies or whatever, and it's just the scientist and the two maids and the two
and
cleaning
Zelda
ladies.
Doesn't even want to be involved.
Yeah.
She's like, what?
And Giles. And I wanted at the end when Dimitri was dying, when he was like, give me the names of the 10 people, I want him to be like, I did it myself. And I
know, like,
he could have had
some
he could have had a good gloat.
Well, I mean, if someone's literally like ripping out your intestines, you can't really be blamed for whatever you're saying.
I guess so. So now the amphibian man is living at her apartment. People are trying to find where he is. They're falling in love.
And at first she's like freaked out by the moment she realizes like, oh, I have feelings for him.
Right.
He has feelings for me. Even though it's like that's been coming for a long time. She's freaked out.
Haven't you read the script?
Then like 5 minutes later she's like, okay, let's do it. So they're in like a honeymoon phase and she's all happy. And Michael Shannon is really mad and his fingers are rotting off. Yeah, because the creature bit 2 of his fingers off. They tried to reattach them. And so for days or weeks now, he's had his fingers grafted back on. He's like, I hope they don't know. But instead his fingers are just rotting off. These 2 fingers. And they smell bad. They're turning black. And he just does nothing for most of the movie. It's like...
It's a metaphor, Lily.
It's a metaphor for the rottenness of his soul. Yes. It's like, who could not see that coming? But, yes. And everyone's like, what's that smell? It's my soul!
No, it's a metaphor for the columns in Samson, and he's ripping them off and then bringing down the towers or whatever it is.
Such an unpleasant fellow.
He is.
I'm not inviting him to any more parties.
I do think there is a point where he becomes a really compelling villain.
Yes.
When
after his boss.
Right, after his boss yells at him and like basically says, if you don't bring us the asset, we will destroy your life.
And I think, and it's interesting because in that conversation, he asks for mercy from his boss, and mercy is something he'd never give someone else.
Right.
So it's like he's humbling himself in a way which is interesting. But yeah, he's such a compelling villain, and because what makes him especially terrifying is because in his eyes, there's nothing wrong with him. Like, he's obviously a sociopath. He's obviously a sadist. He's just an unpleasant fellow. But in his eyes, he's the hero of his own tale.
Right.
And so that makes him very dangerous.
And like in this moment, as he runs into the bathroom and starts chugging the pills or whatever, he's like going through a reverse hero's redemption moment where he takes control of his life, but for selfish purposes.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And then later, of course, he confronts Zelda and her husband, Brewster, who you said your headcanon was he's actually
because
Bruce Wayne.
Zelda, Eliza's friend, for most of the movie, she's complaining about her husband Bruce, and in my mind I was imagining Bruce Wayne, as his terrible husband who doesn't appreciate his wife and doesn't talk much, which to me makes sense, but...
Whoops. Somehow that skips all the way.
And that's the end of the movie.
No, okay. I guess somewhere between here and the next skip is most of the action. But anyways,
So Michael Shannon finds Dmitri, the secretly Soviet scientist, who's already shot and bleeding out by his higher-ups.
Oh wait, I missed the fingers.
He screwed up by rescuing the fish man because they wanted him to kill the fish man so that it would screw up the Americans' plans. But Dmitri cared about the fish man. So... But anyway, so Dimitri's bleeding out. Michael Shannon shakes up his intestines a bit and is like, tell me what's going on. And so Michael Shannon figures out that it's Eliza and Zelda who are behind this. So he goes and terrorizes Zelda.
So was the fish man bleeding in the tub because he's tired of being in a tub? Is that...
Yes. It's
Okay.
implied that he's getting sick because he's in this
Gross
small
little tub,
standing... Yeah. And the fish man
we
also
missed
like gets up
somehow
and walks around.
we skipped through the moment where the moment that upset me the most in the movie, where she decides to fill
on an impulse, like
yeah,
a split-second decision.
on an erotic impulse to block the bottom of the bathroom door and then fill the entire bathroom with water.
Of like this rickety top floor apartment
That's right above
above a movie theater. And like it's not airtight at all, this bathroom. So she fills it up with water. It's leaking. It's dripping down, like raining into the theater. It's dripping down on this old man who's sleeping in the theater. It wakes him up. He's like, what is going on? So what is the symbolism of that?
What's the symbolism of that?
What's that? No, of her filling the bathroom.
It symbolizes for me how horrified I am that someone would do that in their apartment. All the water damage. Oh yeah, and then Giles comes in and opens the door, even though it's obvious that
it's
he
full
shouldn't.
of water.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he just opens the door, which floods the entire apartment with water.
He's like,
and causes, one can only imagine, incalculable damage. That is never addressed for the
Yes,
rest
and
of the
then
movie.
in the next scene, it all looks as usual. That is the most unrealistic part of the movie.
Yes, definitely.
That's the real science fiction.
I'm trying to get to the finger scene. The true best scene of the movie. Here we go. So we meet Brewster finally. Brewster Wayne.
He's not very good at keeping a secret.
Right.
I hope that Zelda goes and runs off with one of her smoking buddies from the facility. That's what I thought was going to happen. But I don't know, maybe that's the sequel.
Zelda doesn't get a character arc,
no.
Unfortunately. She just...
I'd watch it. I'd watch that spin-off.
She just lightly chides her husband after decades of misery. She just says, and that's the end of her arc.
Well, we can't all have a fish man.
The shape of fish sex. So he rips off his fingers. There's a whole Samson and Delilah metaphor that's strung out
and makes no sense
twice
yes.
throughout the movie.
But just emphasizes how Michael Shannon sees himself as a hero who's been unfairly tricked by the world into losing his strength, but it's like not his fault. So he rips off his rotting fingers, throws them under their TV stand. And it's like, I actually thought something more awful was going to happen with his fingers, like he was going to cram them down someone's throat, or I don't know. Like, I thought something very ominous would happen. This isn't a family picture anyway. It's really not.
Yeah. I wish that Brewster would have beaten him up or something.
Yeah. Yeah, Brewster is like...
Brewster
there's
did nothing.
There's this woman threatening... There's this
woman threatening his wife.
No, Michael Shannon...
There's this fishman threatening his wife.
Being extremely creepy and threatening to his wife. And Brewster, like, doesn't care. Then he gives them all the information he wants and acts... Yeah, he's terrible.
So, he finds in her house the calendar where she wrote the day that she wrote the location that she was going to release the amphibian man.
Because that wasn't very smart, but they needed that to happen for this.
Yeah, I remember
for this plot point.
On the second time watching it, I remember as she was writing that, I remembered that something terrible happens later on with that. So, yeah, not very smart. And then they take 10,000 years to say goodbye, which allows them to be
caught by
Michael Shannon and shot multiple times. And then he heals them magically.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain your theory?
Well,
your fan theory?
I mean, okay, and big spoilers, which I already gave away an hour ago.
Spoilers for this movie that won Best Picture 2 hours ago, or 2 years ago.
2 hours ago.
2 hours ago.
So, Fishman heals himself because he's like a magical god, and then also her, and then jumps with her fully clothed into the canal, and then it's revealed that the scars on the sides of her throat are really gills. Shocker. I mean, who didn't guess that 5 minutes into the movie? So then they swim away, and they're I guess happy forever. So the narrator tells us who's Giles, right? But anyways, that's what happens. But I think another equally valid interpretation is that since she's somebody who very much lives a life of fantasy, and there's at least one fantasy sequence in this, she lives a life of interior romantic fantasy. I think that it's equally valid to see that the happy ending where he heals her and grabs her and her cuts her scars are magically gills is just a fantasy she's having as she's dying, because we see this shot where, you know, she's bleeding out, she reaches out and holds the fishman's hand and kind of stares at him as she's bleeding out, she's dying, and then all the rest of this magical stuff happens. So I don't know. I think, you know, I'm not trying to be a Debbie
So you
Downer,
don't think that her gills have any basis in reality?
The fact that her gills suddenly show up at the end,
yeah.
I mean, I think that I kind of believe it in the world of the story, but it is something that makes me think that maybe this is her final fantasy, because there's no I mean, Zelda does say, oh, she was found by the water when she was a baby, but it's like, okay, but then why does she look completely human except for that?
Who can say?
So it's not like they're the same species. I don't know, unless she's the American version of a fish person, or maybe she's just a mutant, like something completely.
Or is
different.
it possible that in his healing powers, which also, they're healing, they're regenerative, and like they can not only heal wounds, but they can like make the guys not be bald anymore. So like, is there a way that
he took her broken vocal cords and turned them into
a strength?
It's possible.
He took her weakness and turned it into a strength.
It's possible. As the Fly wanted to do, but now he does it because he's
full
doing
circle.
it for love. He's doing it for love.
Tie it all together at the end. Poetry of the flesh. It's something that Seth Brundle couldn't grasp, and in the end, his greed and lust only made him more machine.
Yes. So I think that grasping at straws here. No, I think that the reason why transformation. The reason why transformation works in Shape of Water works out well for the characters in a way it doesn't in The Fly is because in The Shape of Water, the characters who experience transformation are motivated by love and sacrifice, not kind of hysterical greed or ambition.
Yeah, and that's the moral of our pod.
Yes. Very intentionally watching these two intentionally matched movies.
Exactly. All right, well, we're just watching it come to a close now.
The last shot is very beautiful.
Yes.
Although, like...
It's interesting that on the marketing on, like, the Blu-ray cover, they have the last shot of the movie.
But you don't know what's going on, so...
Or do you? Fish sex.
You can't see her go. It's all in the implication. Okay. Well, thanks for having me on the Dank Hank
Yes,
podcast.
This was fun, a cool science fiction Christmas double feature. Which is definitely what it was. It was definitely Christmas themed, and this will definitely come out on Christmas 2019.
Christmas 2020 is when you'll finish editing.
Yes. Exactly. All right. Well,
Okay.
this has
We'll
been
have to do it again
a fun time.
sometime.
Dank Hank
someday.
podcast. I'm here with Liliana, Meldrum, Serbicki, and anything you want to plug before we go?
Well,
Your hot Instagram with
hot
many
Instagram
posts
with
on it.
nothing on it, just for following.
Do you have a blog or an email newsletter?
An email newsletter. I send out some carrier pigeons with. Well, I do.
Any work you have published?
Any work. I'm trying to think what I would
any
specifically
spicy
want to
robot
plug. Spicy robot.
Any spicy robot
I'm very
themes?
excited about my NaNoWriMo success this year for
That's exciting.
which has been several times attempted, but this year I did finish NaNoWriMo, which was a cyberpunk AI focused novel with some social justice themes. So we'll see how that ends up. Yeah, this year has been fun creatively with me. I have had some creative memoir published, some reviews of things published, and next year I want to focus on editing a lot of things I drafted, basically. And there
Yes,
could
don't
be
we all?
yeah, there could be some more podcast related things up ahead. I have some projects I'm working on that I need to develop before I say anything. So,
Cool.
Yep.
Well, yeah, thanks for being on. I'm Hank Meldrum. You can find me at Hank Meldrum on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. Under the Flower is now free to view online. Go check it out.
I hear it's very well written.
Yes, that's also what I've heard. All right. Thank you to anyone who listened for listening. Bye.